Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Brusch.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
John Patrick Brusch, B-R-U-S-C-H.
And you previously were with the Fairfax County Police Department?
That's correct.
Okay. And in what capacity was your final position?
I was the Deputy Chief
Okay.
of the Administrative Support Bureau. I'm sorry.
Yes. At some point prior to going to the administrator, were you transferred from another department to go to the Administrative Support Bureau?
Just for clarification, are you asking my previous assignment before
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I was the Deputy Chief of the Major Crimes Bureau.
Okay. And you were transferred from there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And was that of your own volition?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You wanted that transfer to the Administrative Support Bureau?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, during your time as Deputy Chief of the Major Crimes Division, you were overseeing or supervising the Homicide Squad at that time, correct?
It was one of several squads under the Major Crimes Bureau.
Okay, I'm just asking about the Homicide Squad. You were supervising the Homicide Squad.
Could I have permission to clarify?
Yeah, sure.
So I was the head of the entire Major Crimes Bureau, which encompassed the Domestic Violence Unit, the Sex Crime Squad, Child Abuse Squad, Robbery, Cold Case, as well as Homicide.
Okay. And were you involved, or were you in that position at the time of February 24, 2023?
So at that time, I was the captain of the Major Crimes Violent Crimes Division, so not a deputy chief.
And when did you become Deputy Chief?
I became a deputy chief in January of 2024.
Okay. And did you have contact or involvement in the case that we're here for today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how would you describe your role in that case among all the other ones that you were handling?
Overall, my responsibilities are similar for all the cases in the Major Crimes Bureau, to include this one. So it's oversight, it's providing advice as needed, support, guidance, and then also raising concerns in the investigative process if those arise.
Okay. Were there concerns in the investigative process by you in this case?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
Okay. And did it relate to digital forensics?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just to get to it, were you involved in the transfer of Detective Miller from digital forensics to child sex?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In fact, you at one point spoke to...
Objection leading.
All right, I'll sustain as to leave.
What, if anything, did you say to Deputy Chief Freed about Brendan Miller to have him transferred?
I had indicated that as far as I was concerned, Detective Miller was not to work another digital forensic case that pertained to the Major Crimes Bureau.
And were you aware of his history prior to you making that, I guess, happen?
Could you please clarify?
His work history there in digital forensics?
Was I aware that he was a detective within the division, the bureau? I guess I'm looking
Well,
for...
I'm assuming you were aware of him being a detective in the bureau. Were you aware of his background in digital forensics?
I guess I would have to say no at that point.
Okay. Was that anything you took into account with with regard to Detective Miller?
No, sir.
And so is it fair to say, or what if anything, or what if any case was the reason that you asked for him to be transferred?
It would be this case that we're here for.
Okay, and what item of this case was it that caused you such concern?
Could I actually go back for 1 second? I didn't say that he needed to be transferred. I indicated that he wouldn't work a case for the Major Crimes Bureau.
Okay.
That was Deputy Chief Reed's decision whether or not he ultimately would be transferred.
Okay, so you as the head of you're the deputy chief of the homicide or the Major Crimes Bureau. By saying that, you essentially caused the transfer.
Judge, I'm going to object to his characterization of the evidence. Objection is to form. The witness has testified that at this point in time, he was the captain of major crimes when the decision was made, not the deputy chief.
All right.
Is that correct?
I was the Deputy Chief of Major Crimes when I made that
All right.
statement.
Okay, and when you're the deputy chief, you make that kind of statement, especially with major crimes, that gets things moving, correct?
I certainly acknowledge that had influence on his transfer.
Okay, and his transfer was classified as performance management? Do you know that term?
I didn't know that that's what his transfer was classified as.
Okay, have you ever heard that term?
We have a performance management document.
Okay, but not a doctrine that allows transfer without documenting discipline?
I couldn't comment on that.
Was there discipline associated with this decision?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were you disciplining him by moving him out of your area?
Absolutely not. I actually retained him in the child exploitation unit.
Okay, so where he is right now.
Yes, sir.
Now, calling your attention to immediately after the killing of Christine Banfield, were you in meetings at that time when you were a captain?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and were you involved with any theories relating to the case after the killing?
I'm sure at some point.
Okay. Do you know what catfishing is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that something that you were pushing with your homicide detectives at any point?
I wouldn't characterize that as pushing.
Okay. Would you tell them that this is the theory? Is that not pushing?
So I had a specific meeting with then Lieutenant Harrington. I believe it was in November of 2023. I was asked by the two commanders, Lieutenant Matthew Lewick, as well as Lieutenant Aaron Weeks, to meet with Lieutenant Harrington. During that time, I actually proposed 3 separate theories to Lieutenant Harrington, and we discussed those theories at that time. So there was not only one theory I was pushing, or presenting, I should say. Ultimately, I was looking for an objective and comprehensive analysis of all the facts and evidence in this case.
And when the catfish theory came up, had there been a collection of all of the evidence, all the digital forensics, fingerprints, DNA, all those things?
Just like with any investigation, it was fluid.
Okay. Had that theory of catfishing come out before any of that was finalized?
I'm sorry, could you go back to the things you had listed?
DNA, digital forensics, and fingerprints.
The digital forensics, for the most part, had been back at that point.
What time frame was that?
That would probably be the spring of 2023
Okay, so
to fall of 2023.
So my question is, within weeks of the killing of Christine Banfield, did you suggest the catfish theory in a meeting of the homicide detectives?
I don't recall ever being in a meeting with homicide detectives. I do recall talking to my command team about that possibility.
And who was your command team?
Lieutenant Weeks as well as Lieutenant Lewick.
Okay, and where was Lieutenant Giasio there at that point?
He was not.
Okay, but you brought him in, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was March of 2024?
That's correct.
And it was at that point that you had decided that catfish theory was?
Objection
viable?
leading.
All right, I'll sustain as to leading.
What, if anything, had you concluded about the catfish theory at the time that Lieutenant Giasio was brought in?
I hadn't made any conclusions at that point. Did I have a strong working theory that this was a catfish? Absolutely.
Okay, and was that something that you told Lieutenant, I guess, Giasio when he came on with you?
I don't ever recall explicitly having that conversation. I think he probably came to that conclusion on his own.
Okay, but the two of you were pretty close in terms of the investigative issues, correct?
Yes, we were.
You were both in narcotics together at one point,
Yes, we were.
and you brought him in to major crimes, correct?
I did. That was a collective decision amongst my command team.
Okay. And so is it not true that you insisted you had to have Giasio come in March of 2024?
That is not true.
Okay. Were you aware that he was on the Brady list?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what's the Brady list for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
It's basically an indication of a time or a potential in where you weren't totally potentially forthcoming.
So truthfulness?
It could be.
But that's essentially the basis of the discipline in the police department, truthfulness, correct?
I think that could vary as well.
Okay.
Ethics, not necessarily truthfulness, so it varies.
But at the time you hired him into that division, he was on the Brady list, correct?
I did not hire him.
Okay, at the time that you asked him to come in and be a lieutenant in your section.
So could I have an opportunity to explain the transfer process?
Judge, I think at this point in time, I would object. I'm not sure the relevance of a non-testifying witnesses being on the Brady list.
Oh, I think we've already established that if you want to move on from that.
Yes.
Okay.
At the time that he was hired, he was on the Brady list, correct?
When he was hired by the police department?
No, by you as a lieutenant within major crimes.
Again, I'd have to explain the transfer process and the selection process.
March 24, was he on the Brady's list?
Yes,
Okay. And this is a 2024, March of 2024.
correct.
And has he been put on the Brady list again during this time?
Objection is to relevance.
All right, what's the relevance as to this time?
Judge, it goes to truthfulness, which will ultimately come in to the decisions to have him involved, the decisions
But at
why.
this time, I'll sustain as to at this time.
Okay. Now, sir, you indicated that you decided that Detective Miller was not going to be, I think as you said, involved in any other major crimes while you were there.
Any of the digital forensics for the major crimes cases, correct.
And then he was transferred.
Within weeks, I would say, yes, sir.
Okay. And what was your basis for that?
So there were a few factors. Would you like me to expand on this?
Were they related to this case?
Yes, sir.
Exclusively related to this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was it related to his work product?
Yes, sir.
And are you talking about the executive summary work product?
That was part of it.
Okay. And so his conclusions were not agreeable to you?
I wouldn't word that way.
How would you word it?
I would word it that his analysis was incorrect.
Okay. And at that time when you determined his analysis wasn't correct, had you had any training in digital forensics?
I have my master's in computer forensics.
Okay, so did you look at some of the items of evidence in order to arrive at that informed decision?
So he had provided me a zip file of a Cellebrite, but that wasn't able to be downloaded.
Okay, so you didn't really review anything in order coming to that conclusion?
Well, I can get into the specifics if you'd like me to.
Well, I'm asking some questions right now, and perhaps we'll get there.
Okay.
You didn't actually check the source of his findings. With
Objection leading.
What, if anything, did you do to check the source of his findings, the digital forensics?
I didn't conduct my own digital forensic analysis, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, and I think you said you couldn't get into the portable case when you were given to.
The zip file of the Cellebrite, correct.
Okay. And so what would be the reason that you would differ from your expert's opinion?
Because of some of the unsubstantiated deductions that he made.
Okay, so it's based upon his decisions relating to his digital forensics expertise.
So the deductions in the wrongful analysis.
Okay, so the decisions.
I wouldn't use that word. I'd say deductions and wrongful analysis.
Okay, and the wrongful analysis relating to the actual digital forensics that were downloaded?
Some of them, yes.
Okay, and did you ever go over those with him in detail?
I would ask clarifying questions.
Did you tell him exactly what it was that you disagreed with in terms of his deductions and his analysis?
I think a couple of them, yes.
Okay, how many were there in total?
Off the top of my head, I could probably list at least 4.
Okay, and so it was based on that, based on your reading of his executive summary, that you decided that it had gotten to the point where he's no longer doing any more major crimes under your tutelage.
Digital forensics for major crimes cases. I retained him as a detective within the Major Crimes Bureau Child Exploitation Unit.
I understand that, the digital forensics section.
He was not going to do digital forensic analysis for any other major crimes case.
Okay, and sorry, bear with me for a second. Were you aware that his work was peer-reviewed outside of the police department?
I was.
And were you surprised to see that they concurred in his findings?
I have a question to clarify. Did they concur on his extraction or his analysis?
Both.
That's news to me.
Okay, so that peer review held no weight for you because you had already decided that the analysis was wrong.
Objection leading.
All right, sustain as to leading. You want to rephrase?
Why was it that the peer review did not hold any weight for you?
Because ultimately the analysis was incorrect.
Okay. Now, in terms of the Cellebrite messages that you say you reviewed, what was it that was the problem with those?
The Cellebrite messages that he had provided,
Yes.
I wasn't able to open the zip file.
Okay, so we don't know anything about the Cellebrite messages as to your decisions on his analysis. Were you privy to a printout of his communications on FetLife?
Yes.
Okay. Were you privy to the communications from Telegram?
Yes.
And do you understand how those were obtained?
Through the digital forensics.
Do you know how that's done?
It's essentially tied to software that then downloads both from a cell phone and or laptop or any digital device.
And did you review that data?
I didn't review all the data, no.
What data did you review?
I reviewed the correspondence.
I'm sorry, the what?
The correspondence on Telegraph, the correspondence on
Okay.
FetLife, there's a significant amount of data when they download these items.
Okay. Now, are you still working as a police officer?
I am not.
Okay. On July 10th, when we were here before the court, you had just moved to the Administrative Support Bureau, correct?
I moved there in February of 2025.
Okay, so, but that's when we found out you had moved, or I found out that you moved to the Administrative Support.
Objection, counsel's testifying.
Overruled.
Correct?
I can't testify to when you found out I was moved.
Okay, on the 10th, we talked about this, correct?
Yes.
And how you had enjoyed this position, and you were really looking forward to, you know, the things that happen in an administrative support bureau, and the challenge of not having, that's being in more of an administrative role than being in major crimes.
I would agree that it was a completely different assignment than I'd had throughout my entire career.
And that's something that you sought, correct?
Correct.
Isn't that what you said?
Yes, sir.
And it's something that you're really excited about, correct?
I don't know if I'd say really excited, just
Well, when you were here on the 10th, you said that you were very interested and excited about your new challenge.
sure.
Okay. And when did you retire?
July 25th, 2025.
When did you put in your retirement paperwork?
July 11th, 2025.
So the Friday after the Thursday that we were in court here?
Correct.
Okay. So what happened, if anything, about the excitement with the Administrative Support Bureau?
Judge, I would object and ask to approach.
Sir, why did you retire one day or put in your retirement paperwork one day after the hearing that we had here on July 10th?
For personal and professional reasons.
Okay. And you're no longer a police officer?
I am not.
Sir, I'm going to change tack here for a little while. Your Honor, I think we have ID'd 91, so 92 would be the next.
All right, yes, sir.
Sir, if you can look on the screen in front of you, are you able to see this communication?
Yes.
Okay, and who is that communication between?
Director Fayez.
Okay, and Director Fayez, who is that?
She's the Director of Victim Services.
Okay, and was she someone that was within your command structure?
Yes, sir.
Okay, exactly where does that fall in the Major Crimes Bureau command structure?
She's part of the command team.
Okay, so would she be involved with command staff meetings?
Yes, sir.
Is he supposed to be there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here we have, it looks like a,
Counsel, if you could go back to the microphone, the jury won't be able to hear you.
sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Looking at the exhibit that's going to be identified as Exhibit 92, do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there's reference to a jail call. Is that you or is that someone else?
They're responding where it says my name.
Okay. And so who else was on this thread?
I believe it would have to be, based on the response of one last favor GI, would be Lieutenant Giasio.
Okay. And so it was the three of you, and you agree that's a communication that you had with all three?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, I move that as Commonwealth's Defense Exhibit 92.
Any objection?
And Judge, it contains hearsay statements. 2 of those individuals have not been called to testify.
All right.
I'll identify
ID
it,
it?
Judge,
Okay.
and we'll get to it later, and
All
that's
right, ID is 92.
92. Sir, do you see that on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it looks to be 3 people.
That's correct.
Okay, and who are those 3 people?
Based on the text message, it would be Chief Kevin Davis, myself, Director Fayez, and Lieutenant Giasio.
And the date of Friday, October 25th, 7:32.
Correct.
Does that have significance for you?
I believe that's the date that Juliana proffered.
Your Honor, can I identify this as Defense Exhibit number 93?
93 identified as 93.
And I'd move that into evidence?
Objection contains hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain as hearsay at this moment.
I'll just identify it,
Okay.
Your Honor. and-
Identified as 93.
Sir, do you see what will be identified as Defense Exhibit number 94?
I do.
Okay, and is that a message group that you were involved with?
Could you just give me a second to read this, please?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir, it is.
And this message that you sent is on October 25th, 2024, correct?
Correct.
And the same significance as the previous message?
Are you saying this day of the proffer?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, have I identified this one yet?
You identified as 94.
94, I'd move that into evidence, Your Honor.
Assume same objection.
Objection,
All
hearsay.
right, I'll sustain the objection at this point.
Okay,
It is
I'll-
ID'd as 94.
ID is 94, thank you. Sir, can you see that message?
I can.
And I'd identify this as Defense Exhibit 95. There are a number of people involved in this message, correct?
It appears that way, yes, sir.
And the names there, does that match up with your memory?
Could I review this as well?
Of course, of course.
I've reviewed it. I don't recall this correspondence, but my name is certainly on it.
Do you have any idea who is writing in the blue boxes,
I can't tell.
even by the discussion?
Well, my issue with being able to tell is that the banner, it's very small initials.
Okay. Your Honor, I think I've identified this as 95.
That's correct.
Okay. I'll ID this and
Okay.
come back to it.
Yes, sir?
Sir, I'm going to have you look at this. It'll be identified as Defense Exhibit 96. Take some time to read it.
I can see my first name up at the top. I don't recall this correspondence.
Okay, and is that with Lieutenant Giasio?
I couldn't say. I see my first name up at the top.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd move to admit that as Exhibit 96.
Judge, two objections, hearsay, and it has not been recognized by the witness as having been his statement.
Right. Sustain the objection. It's just ID as 96 at this point.
Sir, please look at this message. This is going to be identified as Defense Exhibit 97.
Again, I see my name at the top. I just couldn't verify if that's me as Patrick and/or who this correspondence is with.
Okay. Let's talk about that. PB, Patrick, that doesn't show up on your text messages?
Well, it appears that this is with somebody else, so it's what appears on their text messages.
Okay, so do you have any idea, based on the content of it, who that person would be?
Are you asking me to take a guess?
No, I want you to conclude who that person is. Can you do that?
I can't definitively say who that's with.
Okay. Your Honor, I would move that in as Commonwealth's Exhibit, or Defense Exhibit 97.
Same objection.
All right, I'll sustain the objection, but ID is 97.
97. Your Honor, is that right?
That was 97.
Okay, okay, thank you. Sir, I'm going to ask you to identify what will be marked as Defense Exhibit number 98. Please read it.
Again, that's my name at the top, or my first name at the top, with the initials PB. I don't recall this correspondence.
Your Honor, I'd move into evidence Exhibit 97.
98.
98, same
sorry.
objection, Judge.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. ID is 98.
Sir, can you look at the screen in front of you and tell me if you recognize this message? Your Your Honor, I'd identify this as Defense Exhibit 99.
All right.
Again, I see that my first name at the top, the initials. I just don't recall this correspondence.
Your Honor, I move in Defense Exhibit 98,
99.
99, objection, Your Honor.
99, sorry.
Sustained, and just ID'd as 99.
Sir, can you see the picture in front of you?
Yes.
And do you have any recollection, based upon your review of the content of these messages, as to whether or not that's yours?
This I do recall, yes, sir.
Okay. And were you the one who wrote about Klingon and Kelsey and not holding off on bringing Klingon and Kelsey? into the
Objection is to counsel's reading the document into evidence, but it's not being admitted.
All right.
Just trying to identify which message.
All right. Well, you can have, just point to it and
Which,
that's the objection.
I'm pointing to that one right there. Is that you, or is that the person you're talking to?
Based on how this is presented, that would be me.
Okay. And in that message, you're talking about Eric Klingon, the prosecutor, correct?
Yes.
And Kelsey Gill, the prosecutor.
Yes.
Okay. And whomever you're speaking to, you're saying, hold off on bringing-
Objection. It has not been admitted into evidence. Counsel cannot read what is written.
I'll sustain that objection.
Okay, Your Honor. I'd move this into evidence as Exhibit 100.
And again, Judge, Commonwealth would object. It contains hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain the objection, but ID'd as 100.
Okay. Sir, this is going to be identified as Defense Exhibit 101. Do you recognize that message?
I don't recall this specific message.
Okay. Is that, do you know if that is your communication, even if you don't remember the content?
I don't recall.
Your Honor, I'll hold this as identification
101.
before moving in.
Okay.
101. Sir, do you recall this conversation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you know who you were communicating with?
Lieutenant Giasio.
And which color of the bubbles are you communicating on?
Gray.
And this is Friday, October 25th. Well, tell me the date. What does it say?
It says Friday, October 25th.
Okay, and what's the significance of that?
That's the date of Juliana's proffer.
Okay. Your Honor, I'll hold off and
All right.
move that.
That's
This is 102.
ID'd as 102.
So sir, do you recall this message that's before you?
Yes, sir.
And was that a message that you participated in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and are you in the gray?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, this would be identified as Defense Exhibit 103.
All right. 103, identified.
Now, Sir, in your communication, you reference someone else in the fourth grade communication down. Who is that person?
That's Director Fayez.
And Director Sally Fayez?
Correct.
Okay. Your Honor, it's identified
It's
as
identified as 103.
103.
Yep. You got it.
Sir, can you see the message before you?
I do.
Is that a message that you were participating in?
Yes, sir. I'm again in the gray.
Okay, and the second box, those are your words?
Yes, sir.
And these are your words?
Yes, sir.
And do you know who you were speaking with?
Lieutenant Giasio.
Okay. Your Honor, I identify that as 104, and
Yes.
we'll move in for...
All right, identified as 104.
Sir, this is Defense Exhibit 105. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
And are those your words?
Yes, sir.
And who are you speaking with?
Lieutenant Giasio.
Your Honor, I'd identify and move to be admitted at a later time.
Okay, just right now it's identified as 105.
Sir, I'm going to identify this as Defense Exhibit 106. Do you recognize that communication?
I do not.
Are you not a participant in this?
I don't know if I am. I can't tell.
Okay. Your Honor, identified as 106.
Identified as 106.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to identify what will be marked as Defense Exhibit 107. Are you involved in that message?
I don't believe I am because I'm referenced in the third person. So if you see the second gray box down, wasn't for your leadership and Brusch believing in you. I don't refer to myself in the third person.
Okay, but you don't remember it if, in fact, you were included in this?
I don't recall.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd move that, I would identify it as
Identified as 107.
107. Thank you. Sir, those messages appear to be quite frequent and with the same group of people. Is that correct?
I guess.
I mean, would that be your, a group that you rely on for discussion about the case?
Certainly people I was in text communications with.
Okay. And the text communications that we know from what we just saw were what you told us, Lieutenant Giasio and Sally Fayez, Director of Victim Services, correct?
Well, there was definitely other ones where you had group people on there as well.
Right, but we didn't identify them.
I think there was one line that said Dan Spital in there as well.
Okay, was he part of your command staff?
Yes, he was.
Okay, and were there anybody else that you saw on there?
I believe Tom Harrington was on one of those
Was
threads.
he part of your command staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and anybody else that you saw there?
I don't recall. I'd have to go through those again.
Okay. You're on court's indulgence.
All right, yes, sir.
Sir, in terms of your command structure, who is below you
As in, how would it
within
appear?
homicide? Yes.
My command structure would have been myself to Major Spital. Then underneath him would have been Captain Harrington, Captain Bobel. Let me clarify, I assume you're talking in this 2024 timeframe.
Yes.
Yes. And then the direct report to Major Spital, I think by the way the diagram was, or as I best can recall, would have been Director Fayez.
And so Director Fayez had a direct report, Major Spital had a direct report,
Yes, I was his direct report.
and is that something that's put into the structure that was set up?
Could you clarify what you're asking?
Well, are you the one who's asking for the direct reports, or is it just based upon their position that they're?
It's based upon their position.
Okay. Was Lieutenant Giasio ever a direct report?
He would have then been underneath, at the way it was structured, Captain Bobel.
Okay. Was there ever any concern by the people in your command staff regarding Lieutenant Giasio directly reporting to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that an issue that you had to deal with?
It wasn't an issue for me.
Okay. Well, in a command structure such as yours, who would Lieutenant Giasio have to go to if he wasn't a direct report?
I think I'd like to be careful about the word have to. It's a command structure, so there is a hierarchy, and I would be at the top of that hierarchy.
Okay, and would you be the person who would give him permission to bypass the others to get to you?
I could.
Okay, in this case, specifically this case, did you tell him to come directly to you and bypass the others?
I did not tell him to bypass the others, but it was known that he would be reporting directly to me.
Okay, so you gave him that assignment, and then he just took it from there without talking to the others?
I actually spoke to the others. They were part of my command team.
Okay, so you then disseminated whatever he said to you directly?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you came into your position as deputy chief, were you told to clean up the homicide division?
No, sir.
Did you in turn tell anybody to clean up the homicide division?
No, sir.
Were you aware of anybody saying that they were here to clean up the homicide division?
Objection as to relevance.
Overruled, if you can answer, that's fine.
No, sir.
Judge, I don't have any further questions.
All right, first examination.
Thank you.
afternoon. So are we to understand that your involvement in the Banfield investigation was as a supervisor only?
As a commander, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you did not collect any evidence in this case?
That's correct. I did not collect any evidence in this case.
Did you direct that any evidence be ignored?
No, ma'am.
You spoke about Brendan Miller and your concerns about his work. You specifically made the statement that he had unsubstantiated deductions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was one of those unsubstantiated deductions recorded in his executive summary that Christine Banfield was the operator of her devices when interacting with the FetLife account?
That's correct.
Okay. And was it that type of unsubstantiated deduction that caused you concern?
Exactly.
Okay. Did you do anything to change his report?
Never.
And did you do anything to change the evidence that he had collected that he believed substantiated his report?
Never.
Okay. Judge, I don't have any further questions of this witness.
Redirect? I'm sorry, could you?
I had one other exhibit that I neglected to introduce.
Do you have any objection to him? Just, he has one more
No,
text
asking
message.
questions, certainly not.
That's fine. Okay, go ahead. It would be 108, Mr. Carroll.
108, yes. Let me just, I'll do my cross and
Okay.
then, or my rebuttal.
Redirect.
Mr. Brusch, the word unsubstantiated can be a difference of opinion in digital forensics, correct?
I guess it would depend on how it applies.
And your statement that it's unsubstantiated was in conflict with your digital forensics expert statement that she was in control of her devices on the FetLife communications, correct?
I don't know that I agree with part of that statement.
Okay, which part?
So there was a conclusion that Christine Banfield was always in the possession of her devices. The crime scene definitively
Relating
demonstrates
to
that to
FetLife,
be
which is what she
incorrect.
asked. The question was relating to FetLife. Do you,
So could you repeat the question?
so you want me to go all the way back to the difference between unsubstantiated and what?
No, the part where you're bridging of unsubstantiated with the FetLife.
Yeah, that was the question that you were asked by Ms. Sands. And so what I'm asking is, you've indicated that it was unsubstantiated. I'm assuming as to the question as to the FetLife communications, correct?
That's what Ms. Sands asked me, correct?
Yes. And so I think your answer was you were talking about generally the statement in his executive summary that she had not relinquished any of her devices. Is that what you were talking about?
Well, those are two different things. I answered Ms. Sands' question, which would be that, yes, his deduction that Christine Banfield was communicating with Joe Ryan was not only actually unsubstantiated, it was wrong.
Well, so what did you look at to reach the conclusion that it was unsubstantiated? What digital forensics did you look at?
So going back to my education and being a master's in computer forensics, you never attribute a device and or a username to a person.
Okay, and is that what you're relying on to make that point?
With regards to Ms. Sands' question, yes.
So that's not supported by any review of the items that were extracted from the 60 different devices that he did?
Well, by happenstance, it is unsubstantiated. Unless Detective Miller was sitting next to Anastasia or Taco Supreme, he could never attribute whomever was talking on those devices.
And so what your position is that you're not going to believe that you can conclude someone's control of the devices unless you have a video or you have someone who was watching it?
It just would be forensically incorrect to make that conclusion.
But digital forensics makes that conclusion.
Objection, counsel's arguing.
I'll sustain that objection.
Sir, I'm going to show you what will be marked as Defense Exhibit 108. You recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And do you recall the date?
I believe that's going to be October 25th, is that correct?
Yes. It doesn't say, but if you recall it that way, that's what.
That's consistent with my communication with Lieutenant Giasio on the date of the proffer.
Okay. And is it your understanding that he was in a separate room outside of the proffer? And you were communicating with him?
I wasn't on site. I don't feel comfortable answering that question.
You don't know personally?
I don't.
Okay. But it was while it was going on, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is this the communication with Lieutenant Giasio?
My communication, as I recall it, with Lieutenant Giasio.
Okay. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit 108, will ID it?
It's identified as 108.
Were you also involved in the transfer of Kyle Bryant, the lead detective?
Yes, sir.
And was that due to his performance?
Performance due to inexperience, as well as the phrase I would use, I believe he was in over his head as a homicide detective.
Okay, and so Miller, so from the group that was in place in October, Detective Brendan Miller was transferred?
He was transferred, I believe, in November.
Okay. But okay. And then Detective Bryant, who was the lead homicide detective in this case, was transferred?
He was transferred in January of 2025.
And that was as a result of your deciding he had to go?
I just didn't believe he was experienced for the homicide squad.
So you transferred him?
He was transferred to the sex crimes unit.
Okay. And in that same time frame, you were transferred, correct?
I was transferred in February of 2025.
And Lieutenant Giasio was transferred
Correct.
during the same time frame?
Right around that same time frame.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Based on Exhibit 108, did you have any questions? Since that was a new,
No, but it was not offered into evidence yet.
no, it's just
so-
ID'd.
Yes.
Okay. Is this witness subject to recall?
Not by the Commonwealth.
No. Are you free to go then?
Thank you.
All right, your next witness?
Lieutenant Giasio?
Giasio.